Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, seeing as you seem to like when I do videos about dice and dice probabilities, I figured I would make this video that I've been meaning to make for well over a year, ever since my friends and I played Free League's Blade Runner. And I wanted to make a video about the step die mechanic used in that game because I found it pretty elegant and pretty intriguing and kind of ingenious. And so this video isn't entirely about Blade Runner, and it's not entirely about step dice mechanics, because there's a lot of step dice mechanics out there. But before we played the game, there were no probabilities available, so I kind of did a deep dive and figured out what they were, and then what came back out at us was kind of interesting. So we were able to go in and create characters in an informed way and all that sort of stuff, and kind of know like how to represent competence in general. So, if you don't know, a step die mechanic is a mechanic where at least one of the dice that you're rolling to do something increases in size depending upon your raw ability or your competence or your skill or whatever it might be. And it's generally a roll high mechanic because when you're increasing the size of the die, well, your chances of rolling more are higher. And if you're also trying to avoid something like the consequences of rolling a 1, which Blade Runner has in it, well then, the larger the die size, the less probable it's going to be that you roll a 1. Right? So, like most games these days, Blade Runner, allows you to represent the competence of your character in any particular attempt based upon two things: your raw attributes and your skill in that area that might be tied to that attribute or not. Doesn't really make a difference as long as you're assembling a die pool, in this case, based upon those two factors. Both of those factors are represented by this dice. And the raw attributes, I think, are something like strength, agility, intelligence, and empathy, if I'm not mistaken. And then there's various skills. Your prowess, your ability in any of these attributes, well, that can range from D, terrible, with rolling a D6, all the way up to A, where you're rolling a D12. And then the other two are represented by, obviously a D8 and a D10. And likewise, whatever skill you have, if your character is completely unskilled, well, they're just rolling a D6. They've got a D. Or if they're incredibly skilled, they're second to none, well, they're rolling a D12. And so you end up having a 2-die pool all the time with these two different sized dice. Now, this will spit out 10 different probabilities because there's 10 different combinations you can have. It really doesn't matter, if your raw ability is the 12-sided die or if your skill is the 12-sided die. If you're rolling a 12 and an 8, you're rolling a 12 and an 8. That's all there is to it. So you can start to look at the various permutations that happen, and you start to see that the chance of success ranges from 31 when you're rolling 2d6 all the way up to 82% when you're rolling 2d12. And the gaps, as you start to improve, well, for the most part, they are big at the bottom. Like, from a D and a D to a D and a C goes from 31% to 49%. So pretty significant jump. When you're going from that to a D and a B, where you're rolling a D10 and a D6, well, that's 59%. Once again, not as big of a jump, but pretty significant. When you're rolling C and C, which is 2D8, well, it only jumps up a little bit. Because here at this point, you've got, average, I guess what you call average raw ability and average skill and something like that. But then, as it goes up, it goes all the way up to A and A, which is 82% chance. So not a bad way to represent it. There are some gaps in the middle. It's not 100% perfect. It's not as granular as you might like. However, it does a pretty good job for a die system, for a step die system, when you're really just trying to represent, how competent is somebody based on these two factors, and we don't want to do a lot of addition and roll all these modifiers and what have you. We just want to roll some dice. And this does a pretty good job at modeling that. And your chances of getting, a 1, well, they range from 31% chance all the way at the bottom when you're rolling 2d6 that you're going to have something bad happen, all the way down to 16% when you're rolling, 2d12. In Blade Runner, this only happens when you push the die roll. But, if you're looking at dice mechanic design and game design, you can take that for what it is. I'm probably going to try to link these figures in something. Maybe I'll try to link a Google Drive or something below. If you take in all the various permutations from advantage and disadvantage, well then that adds 20 more 20 more lines to this. And it gives you a little bit more gradations. And the way that this handles advantages and disadvantages, is when you have, some kind of situation where you're rolling at disadvantage, you take away the smaller die. One of the things that we discovered was that having a large die, either in skill or an attribute, was very, very important because disadvantage is taking away the smaller die. So if I get a D12, even if I'm rolling at disadvantage with this D12, let's see, what is it? It's something like, what's my 58% chance of success? Pretty good. Pretty good. But if I'm doing that, with a B and a B, like 2D10, well, now it's only 50%. And it gets worse as you go on. Likewise, if you're rolling at advantage, you add a second of the smaller dice to the roll. And so it adds, it doesn't quite give you the same kind of push or oomph that disadvantage takes away from you, but it's something. Paradoxically, in this system, the chances of rolling the 1 go all the way up and down based on this advantage and disadvantage, because obviously you're rolling more dice or less dice. I have to double check the system to make sure they don't take care of that, but that's something to take into consideration, because every once in a while with a die mechanic, something that looks really good can spit out something really odd at the other end. I think they might have fixed how that works so that doesn't happen. Maybe not. I don't remember. But overall, this is a pretty cool step die mechanic. And in general, step dice mechanics are a really elegant way to represent things like competence without going through all kinds of gyrations and modifiers and all that sort of stuff. Just increase the size of the die. I like this one an awful lot because it uses those two different, it's a 2-die pool, so it's representing, once again, your attribute and your skill. And I find that it models that pretty well. It's something to take a look at, and it may be for you, it might not be for you, but they pretty good job by Free-League coming up with that particular system to represent this particular game. And you could probably use that in a lot of other genres as well. You just have to be a bit aware of what the probabilities are, just like always. What do you think?